The first time I was arrested, I was 11. And then I was arrested 7 times more, and I'm 23.
Student debt is like a gray cloud that's just hanging over me.
I'm 23 and I still haven't been to the gynecologist ever because you can't even understand the cost.
Not an intellectual exercise, is it? It's not an abstract idea. You're seeing this stuff every single day. We change the country when people begin talking about the reality of their lives and not being ashamed to do it.
Excited to have you all. Most of y'all know me, but my name is Phillip Agnew, co-founder of Dream Defenders, but currently working as a surrogate for the Sanders campaign. And you all know, do you all know this?
I'm the Sanders campaign.
I think I've seen him before.
We want to have a kind of wide-ranging conversation, but we're starting here. All of you all are students or recently graduated, and all of you all have student debt, myself included.
Yeah.
Right? And so we want to talk about some of the issues that are important to you all, some of the things that would be changed if this debt wasn't hanging over you.
Let's start it off with the question that Phillip raised. Do you think young people should have to go deeply in debt in order to get an education?
And I definitely don't think students should have to go into debt.
I went to the University of Vermont because, quite frankly, they offered me the most money, probably because I'm not white and I can ski. Being a student that knew I was taking out loans to go to school, I didn't have the luxury of experimenting with the classes that maybe I wanted to dabble in. When I went off to graduate school, it was the same idea. I went where I got the most money, and I went to a one-year program. It's making it difficult for me to buy a home, for me to actually just bring my credit up. I'm still struggling to pay off the amount that I owe from graduate school, and also going back to school now to do my prereqs for medical school.
I was the first person in my family to go to college, and it was something that I wanted to do and also felt like I had to do it to be able to help out my family in some way. And it's just been making it very difficult, and I don't think it was until this last year where I was actually trying to help my parents get a home, and I can't, right?
I'm a low-income student, I'm first generation, and they wouldn't take my Medicaid, so I had to buy the university insurance, which was probably like $1,000 or $2,000 per semester. And it's on my credit. I can't get a car, things like that are all being affected because of student loans.
Right now, I have a child on the way, and that debt, trying to purchase my first home, that's all, it's an obstacle right now for me, a real life obstacle. So I'm dealing with that debt and credit scores and all of that to purchase my first home before my child gets here. I teach civics and career planning. And for my students to always mention, why should I go to school? I'm just gonna graduate with debt. So that's already clouding.
Is that very much on their minds?
They talk about it all the time because they hear it. They hear people talk about, I'm in debt. And they're like, I'm not going to school. I could get a job. I can make money right out of high school. So for college, for kids in my neighborhood, for them to think of college and immediately think of debt, that's a problem.
You know, we live in a country that says that you'll have all this opportunity, right? And we think of those opportunities as the opportunities to decide what our lives will look like. But we've heard every single story. Debt is deciding, right? What we do. Debt decided where you went to school, how long you went to school, if you went to school. And that's, that set of circumstances, when you're talking to a young person, it's not an illogical thing for them to say, I'm not going to school. It actually makes a whole lot of sense to say, I'm not going to pursue my education, because debt then decides my life from that point on.
I'll tell you a funny story. A couple of years ago, I was at a meeting in D.C. and I was speaking, and I said, in Finland, college education is free. And some guy jumps up, young guy jumps up, he says, Senator, you're wrong. It's not free. They pay us to go to school. All right. All right. So the point is that if you are a smart government, what do I want from you guys? I want you guys and every other person your age and younger to get the best education that you can, right? That's good for the country. That's good. What you're saying is we're looking now in a generation of young people who are saying, I can't afford, I'm not going to get an education. All right? Think about what that means to the country.
And I think about '08, when we had this huge economic crisis and you had all these huge corporations that went into debt, and people said, well, no, we need to save them. They're the backbone of our economy. And we bailed out huge corporations, and now we have a whole generation of students with student loan debt, students who are going to be the backbone of our economy. And it seems insane, like an insane idea to bail them out, to help them out.
Okay, so what, Danielle, is the conclusion? If the government could bail out Wall Street, what do you think it should do for your generation?
They should bail us out too.
I think so.
Yeah.
So the question that I throw to you is, how does it happen that Congress, against my vote, by the way, bailed out Wall Street, but the idea of helping your entire generation by canceling all student debt seems like a radical idea? How does that happen?
It seems to be a politics of profits over the lives of working class people, the people who are the foundation of this country.
My students, when I teach them about lobbyists, PACs, and those things, it's a word I always use, corptocracy. And our country has become a corptocracy, where these big corporations control legislation, control decisions. We put people in office, but those people are listening to the PACs and the lobbyists.
And how do we change that?
These big corporations aren't for us. They have never been for us, but yet they're the ones, like you said, with those PACs making these decisions, right? It should be up to the folks who are actually doing the work, because these corporations will be nothing without us at all.
Do you see much about that on TV, or? You had a funny face there. Do you see anything about that?
No, of course not.
What do you perceive the healthcare situation to be like in America today?
I'm gonna jump in super quick. I ain't been to the doctor in 7-8 years, and it's not because I don't like going to the doctor, right? It's because it just wasn't financially good for me.
I had a knife go through my hand, and I didn't have health insurance because I just moved to Miami. And I remember patching my hand up with duct tape because I didn't know what else to do.
I'm not gonna go to the hospital unless it's a gaping wound.
My family would receive food stamps, and so they was getting health care from the government, but you age out of that. And I got a really good opportunity to be an RA on campus. So I'm like, oh yeah, I don't have to commute, raise gas money, all this kind of stuff. But living on campus, you have to get health care. I was not in a place where I could say no. They put it on my bill, and it was actually one of the reasons I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to walk the stage because I have to pay this health care off from this university.
I was incredibly lucky that a friend's older sibling happened to be a physician in Miami, and they took me under the table, sewed up my hand. But if I hadn't known someone that could help me, I would have been walking around with a gaping hole in my hand tied together with duct tape.
My friend was in an accident with his car, and he wouldn't get into the ambulance because he knew how much it would be to ride to the hospital. Him and my partner had to wait to call his mom to come pick them up to take him because they knew that bill just for that ride would be so much, which was kind of scary, right? Especially if he needed immediate care, and thank God he didn't at that.
Scary, it's insane is what the better word I think is.
That's the environment that we're currently living in.
In this country, 500,000 people go bankrupt every single year. And you can understand why. If anybody here, God forbid, me, God forbid, had a serious health problem and you didn't have great health insurance, what do you think is going to happen? If you got a $100,000 bill from a hospital, which is not unusual, you're shaking your head like it's unthinkable that you could pay it off, right? Meanwhile, I should tell you that the insurance companies and the drug companies last year combined made $100 billion in profit. So you can't afford to go to a doctor.
Nope.
You are in debt for having to do health insurance. And the drug companies and the insurance companies made $100 billion in profit last year. It's a pretty crazy system.
We live in Florida. 100% of our juvenile facilities are private. One of the largest prison corporations in the world, GEO Group, is headquartered here in South Florida, just a few miles away. Criminal justice is something in Florida that we face every single day. So what are your thoughts?
Miami has one of the biggest jail systems in the country. Yeah, I could talk about criminal justice all day.
For me and all of my friends, it's probably out of 10 of us, only 2 have never received an arrest or any charge. And out of 10 of us, only about
10 friends who grew up together?
Yes, only 2 have never been to jail. The rest,
8 have been to jail.
Yes, misdemeanors, me included.
I have 4 cousins that I grew up with incarcerated, one for 20 years, one for 3 years, one for 7 years. One got sentenced 3 weeks ago for 8 years after already doing 9 years in prison.
That misdemeanor charge cost me $3,750. Because to become a teacher, I had to pay the Florida Department of Education a fee every month for drug testing, had to pay a fee for substance abuse counseling for a misdemeanor of marijuana.
I was a high school teacher in inner city Detroit, and from my classroom to juvenile delinquent facilities or juvenile detention facilities, it was a revolving door. I had a student that walked into my class, February, mind you, the school year starts in August, and he said he'd just gotten out of prison. He was in jail because he held up a convenience store because he was so hungry. He had siblings at home, and they didn't have food, and all he wanted was a bag of chips, and he got sent to prison for that. I left Detroit after a year, and when I reach out to my students to see how they are, there's a new student in prison or a new student coming out of prison whenever I speak to them, and it's heartbreaking.
All of my brothers, including my father, have been in jail or prison throughout my life.
And that doesn't just affect your life, but it affects you trying to get an education, you trying to get a job, you trying to do anything really.
It's always something that you have to answer for.
Yeah, always.
Let me ask you just a dumb and simple question. What do we do? I mean, what is, if you're president of the United States, what do you do to prevent so many people, often black men, from spending much of their lives behind bars?
You know, this past year, I think it was really the first time that I started to think about, like, who my dad could be if he never been through the system and the things that he could do. Like, he's such a smart man and driven and dedicated, but he cannot participate in our democracy because he can't vote. He's not able to get a job. There's no type of process or real systems in place about what it looks like after you get out of the criminal justice system to actually have them be a part of our society and be like active citizens. Like, there's nothing that in place that really facilitates that wholeheartedly. The first step is providing folks with resources, right? Like, we're not in a society where folks are getting their basic needs met, and that's why a lot of this crime happened. It's simply because of that.
People unable to earn an income.
Yeah, earn an income, have a proper roof over their head, be able to get food, all these different kind of things.
One main thing I will always champion is effective community organizations and after school programs. Sometimes school may not be that place for our students, so once they leave that building, it should be something in the community for that child.
I think increasing minimum wage so that families can actually afford to survive. I read somewhere that if minimum wage had increased with the cost of living, it'd be $22 an hour.
You know, I talk about these issues every day, but I don't talk about them in anywhere near as powerfully as you guys do, because in many ways you're living these issues. A lot of people don't want to talk about this, all right? But what you have to understand, for every person here, there are millions out there who are experiencing exactly the same things that you guys have talked about. And they have to know that they're not alone, that they're not the only person who has brothers and sisters who are in jail, not the only person who can't afford health care, not the only person in student debt, not the only person maybe sleeping out on the streets, okay? And when people begin to talk about it, then they ask the question, why? Why does it happen? That's the history of change in America. So you guys are part of that. You really are. Each and every one of you are part of that effort to educate and organize people and make the change that this country desperately needs. So I thank you all. Let's go forward together.